The resignation letter sat folded in Nathan Hale's coat pocket all morning, pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. By 10:30, he had rewritten the first sentence in his mind at least 20 times. By 11, he stopped looking at the clock entirely. And by noon, while the rest of the 23rd floor hurried through meetings and presentations inside the glass headquarters of Ashcroft Dynamics, Nathan quietly powered down his company laptop, slipped his daughter's drawing into his satchel, and walked away from the career he had spent 12 years building. No announcement. No dramatic farewell. Just one exhausted single father stepping into a lift with tired eyes and a decision nobody in the office would understand. As the doors slid shut, he stared at the crayon drawing Emily had made the night before. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. One was clearly Nathan. One was Emily with crooked brown pigtails. The third figure was labeled, Home. Not Mum. Not another person. Just home. That hurt more than he expected. The lift chimed softly as it descended through polished corporate floors where people discussed profit margins, investor confidence, and expansion forecasts. Nathan used to care deeply about those conversations. He used to stay late voluntarily. Used to believe hard work could solve almost everything. But hard work had not been there the night Emily developed a fever and whispered for him while he sat in an airport lounge 200 miles away. Hard work had not comforted her after school when another child asked why her mom never came to parent events. Hard work had not helped Nathan remember the last time they ate dinner together without him checking emails beneath the table. Somewhere along the way, success had slowly started costing more than it gave back. The lift reached the lobby. Nathan stepped out into the bright London afternoon carrying nothing except his satchel, his resignation letter, and the strange fear that he might be ruining both their lives. Outside the building, people rushed past with takeaway coffees and ringing phones. Buses groaned at the curb. A cyclist shouted apologies after clipping a traffic cone. The city moved with the same relentless speed it always had. But Nathan stood still. For the first time in years, he had nowhere he urgently needed to be. His mobile vibrated. He expected another work message. Instead, the screen lit up with a photo of Emily smiling beside a lopsided birthday cake. Mrs. Carter calling. Nathan answered immediately. Hello? Mr. Hale? The elderly woman sounded slightly breathless. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Is Emily all right? Oh yes, she's fine. She just wanted to show me a spelling test she got full marks on. I thought you'd like to know. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Full marks. And he had almost forgotten the test was today. That's brilliant, he said softly. She was worried you might still be at work tonight. A painful silence stretched between them. Mrs. Carter had watched Emily after school for nearly 3 years. She never judged Nathan aloud, but he often felt the quiet kindness in her voice carried truths he already knew. Well, Nathan finally said, staring up at the towering office building behind him, I don't think work will be a problem anymore. Oh. I left. Mrs. Carter paused. Then, very gently, she said, sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is stop running long enough to hear their child's heart. Nathan swallowed hard. He thanked her, ended the call, and began walking toward the station. The future terrified him. But for the first time in months, he could breathe. 3 hours later, Nathan sat across from Emily at their tiny kitchen table while she enthusiastically explained the difference between adverbs and adjectives using pieces of carrot as examples. Their small flat above the pharmacy wasn't much. The wallpaper in the hallway peeled slightly near the radiator. The windows rattled during heavy traffic. The kitchen tap dripped unless turned exactly right. But that evening, the place felt warmer somehow. Emily waved her fork dramatically. An adverb describes how someone does something. Nathan nodded seriously. So if someone eats carrots dramatically, that's an adverb. And if someone eats carrots heroically? Emily giggled. That too. Nathan smiled. At 8 years old, Emily had a way of making ordinary moments feel important. She inherited that from her mother. The thought arrived quietly, as memories often did now. Claire laughing while dancing barefoot in the kitchen. Claire falling asleep beside Emily's hospital cot after the asthma diagnosis. Claire squeezing Nathan's hand and promising him everything would somehow be all right, even during the final difficult weeks before illness took her away. 3 years later, he still reached for her in half-awake moments. Emily noticed his expression shift. "You miss Mum tonight," she said gently. Nathan looked at his daughter in surprise. Children understood more than adults like to believe. "I do," he admitted. Emily nodded thoughtfully before taking another bite of dinner. "I think she'd want us to keep being happy anyway." Nathan looked down at his plate because suddenly his eyes burned. How had this little girl become so wise already? After dinner, they washed dishes together while music played softly from an old radio. Emily sang incorrectly to nearly every lyric. Nathan corrected none of them. By 9 o'clock, Emily curled beside him on the sofa wearing oversized pajamas and holding the book they had been reading together for weeks. Nathan read aloud while she leaned against his shoulder. Halfway through chapter 6, she interrupted quietly. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Are you really not going back to work?" He closed the book carefully. "No. I'm not." "Because of me?" "No," he turned toward her fully. "Because I forgot something important." "What?" Nathan brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "That life isn't supposed to feel like missing everything that matters." Emily considered this with surprising seriousness. "Does that mean we'll be poor now?" Nathan laughed softly despite himself. "Possibly a little poorer." "That's all right," she declared. "We still have spaghetti." He pulled her into a hug while she squealed dramatically. Later, after Emily fell asleep, Nathan sat alone at the kitchen table with unpaid bills spread before him. Reality returned quickly in silence. Mortgage payments. School costs. Utility notices. Savings that would not stretch nearly as far as he wished. His resignation had not been impulsive exactly. He had spent months wrestling with the decision. But knowing something is necessary does not make it less frightening. He stared at the numbers until his head ached. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Nathan nearly ignored it. Instead, he answered. "Nathan Hale speaking." A calm female voice replied, "Mr. Hale, this is Victoria Whitmore." Nathan sat upright instantly. Everyone in British finance knew the name. Victoria Whitmore was the CEO of Ashcroft Dynamics. Billion-pound acquisitions followed her decisions. Newspapers called her ruthless. Investors called her brilliant. Nathan had met her only twice despite working for the company over a decade. Both times lasted under 5 minutes. "I'm sorry," he said cautiously. "Victoria Whitmore?" "Yes." Nathan glanced instinctively at the resignation copy still lying on the table. "If this is about my departure, HR already has my paperwork." "I know," Victoria said. "That's why I'm calling." Nathan frowned slightly. Most CEOs did not personally contact mid-level operations directors after resignations. Especially not at 10:30 at night. "I don't understand." "I imagine not," Victoria replied. "Would you be willing to meet tomorrow morning?" Nathan hesitated. "With respect, I've already made my decision. I'm not asking you to reverse it." "Then why meet?" There was a brief pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice sounded different somehow. Less corporate. More human. "Because today you walked away from a position half the company spends years fighting toward." Nathan said nothing. And people don't do that unless something important is broken, she continued. I'd like to understand why. He leaned back slowly. Part of him wanted to refuse immediately. Another part felt oddly curious. What time? He asked at last. 9 o'clock. My office. Nathan almost laughed. Her office occupied the entire top floor. He suddenly regretted answering the phone. Fine, he said quietly. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Nathan is fine. Another pause. Then you may call me Victoria. The line disconnected. Nathan stared at his phone for several seconds. Then he looked toward Emily's bedroom. He had no idea that by this time tomorrow, everything in their lives would begin changing again. The next morning, Nathan arrived at Ashcroft Dynamics wearing the only suit he owned without coffee stains. The receptionist looked startled to see him. I thought you'd left, she blurted before catching herself. Nathan smiled politely. Apparently not entirely. Moments later, he stood inside a private lift ascending toward the executive floor. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked older than 41. Too many late nights. Too many worries carried alone. Too many years surviving instead of living. The doors opened silently into a quiet corridor lined with modern artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking London. A woman in a navy blazer approached immediately. Mr. Hale? I'm Joanna, Ms. Whitmore's assistant. She's expecting you. Nathan followed her past offices larger than his entire flat. At the end of the corridor stood double oak doors. Joanna opened them gently. Victoria Whitmore stood beside the windows holding a coffee cup. She was older than Nathan expected, perhaps early 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair neatly pinned back. Her posture carried unmistakable authority, but her expression surprised him most. She looked tired. Not ordinary tiredness. Lonely tiredness. Nathan, she said warmly. He nodded awkwardly. Victoria. She gestured toward a seating area near the windows. Please sit. Nathan obeyed carefully, uncertain whether this was a meeting or an interrogation. Victoria remained standing for a moment, studying the skyline below. When my husband died, she said suddenly, I returned to work 48 hours later. Nathan blinked. He had not expected personal conversation. Victoria turned toward him. Everyone praised my strength. Newspapers called me resilient. The board admired my dedication. She gave a faint humorless smile. My son stopped speaking to me for almost a year. Nathan stayed silent. He was 14, she continued quietly. I missed his school concerts. His football matches. The terrible poetry phase all teenagers go through. Something softened in her eyes. And one day I realized I could recite quarterly revenue projections from memory but had no idea who my son had become. Nathan felt an unexpected ache in his chest. Victoria sat opposite him. Yesterday, I saw your resignation letter. Nathan shifted slightly. I apologize for the short notice. I'm not concerned about notice. She folded her hands carefully. I'm concerned that one of our most respected directors reached a point where leaving entirely felt like the only way to remain a father. Nathan looked away toward the windows. The city sprawled endlessly below them. I tried balancing both, he admitted quietly. For years. And? I failed. Victoria considered him thoughtfully. Did you? Nathan almost laughed. I missed Emily's first lead role in a school play because Frankfurt investors delayed a dinner meeting. Victoria's expression tightened. I forgot her parent-teacher appointment last spring. He swallowed. She once asked Mrs. Carter if work loved me more than she did. The words lingered heavily between them. Victoria looked down briefly before speaking again. My son asked me something similar. Nathan finally met her eyes. For several moments neither spoke. Then Victoria leaned forward slightly. "I'm going to make you an offer, Nathan. A rather unconventional one." He frowned. "What kind of offer?" "I want you to come back." Nathan shook his head immediately. "No. You haven't heard it yet. The problem isn't salary." "I know." She reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward him. Nathan opened it slowly. Inside was a proposal unlike anything he expected. Flexible executive schedule. Remote leadership authority. Reduced travel requirements. Protected family hours. Expanded parental support initiatives company-wide. He looked up in disbelief. Victoria watched him carefully. "I want Ashcroft Dynamics to become a place where talented people do not have to sacrifice their families to succeed." Nathan stared at the papers. "This would change company policy." "Yes. The board will never approve it." "They will if I insist." Nathan frowned harder. "Why?" Victoria's answer came quietly. "Because yesterday you reminded me of something I should have fixed years ago." Silence filled the office. Nathan turned another page. The proposal continued. Then he reached the final section and froze completely. Executive Partner, Family Well-Being and Operational Strategy. He looked up sharply. "You're offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you influence." Nathan could barely process the words. "You barely know me." Victoria gave a small smile. "I know your performance history. I know you voluntarily covered junior staff workloads during the pandemic. I know your team has the lowest turnover in the company. I know 3 separate employees wrote personal letters saying you were the reason they remained at Ashcroft during difficult periods." Nathan stared speechless. "And," Victoria added gently, "I know a man does not walk away from a career he spent 12 years building unless his priorities are deeply sincere." Nathan looked back at the proposal. His pulse quickened. Part of him wanted to accept instantly. Another part feared disappointment. "What's the catch?" he asked quietly. Victoria smiled sadly. "There's always a catch, isn't there?" He said nothing. "The catch," she replied, "is that changing a culture this large will be difficult. Some executives will resist. Some will mock the idea entirely. You would spend years fighting for policies many people still consider unrealistic." Nathan exhaled slowly. "And if I fail?" Victoria looked directly at him. "Then at least your daughter will know you tried building a world where fathers could come home." The words hit him harder than she likely intended. Nathan lowered his eyes. For a long moment he thought about Emily waiting after school every afternoon. About bedtime stories rushed between emails. About Claire once whispering, "Promise me she grows up feeling chosen." He had broken that promise more times than he liked admitting. Finally he asked, "Why me?" Victoria stood and walked toward the windows again. Without turning around, she answered softly. "Because people who genuinely care for others are increasingly rare in leadership." Nathan left the meeting 2 hours later carrying the proposal in numb hands. Outside the building, London felt strangely brighter. Terrifyingly brighter. He walked aimlessly for nearly 40 minutes before stopping at a small park near the river. Children played football while office workers hurried past eating sandwiches. Nathan sat on a bench and reread the proposal 3 times. The offer was extraordinary. Life-changing. But also frightening. Could he trust the company not to slowly drag him back into the same exhausting cycle? Could culture really change? Could he lead that change? His phone buzzed again. Emily. "Hi, Dad." Her cheerful voice immediately softened his thoughts. "Hi, sweetheart. Mrs. Carter says we can make banana bread today if you're not stuck in meetings." Nathan smiled despite himself. No meetings. Really? Really? Emily gasped dramatically. This is becoming my favorite week ever. He laughed quietly. Then she lowered her voice slightly. You sound funny. Funny good or funny bad? Thinking funny. Nathan leaned back against the bench. That obvious? You always make tiny sigh noises when you're worried. Children noticed everything. He rubbed his forehead gently. My old boss offered me something unexpected today. Another job? Sort of. Emily went silent for a moment. Would it make you miss dinner again? Nathan's chest tightened. That's the important question, isn't it? Yes. Such a simple answer. Such a truthful one. Nathan watched a father nearby helping his young son tie shoelaces. I don't know yet, he admitted honestly. Emily considered this carefully. Mom always said people should build lives, not just jobs. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Claire had said that often. Usually while laughing at his inability to relax during holidays. She did say that, he murmured. So maybe choose the life one. After ending the call, Nathan sat very still. Children did not complicate wisdom the way adults did. That evening he cooked spaghetti while Emily attempted homework beside the kitchen counter. She eventually asked, Are you going back? Nathan stirred sauce thoughtfully. I might. Emily's shoulders drooped slightly. But only if things change. She looked up. What kind of things? Nathan thought carefully before answering. The kind that make people remember their families matter too. Emily smiled faintly. That sounds important. It is. She returned to coloring while Nathan watched her quietly. Maybe this opportunity was not simply about his career. Maybe it was about something larger. Over the following weeks, Nathan's life transformed faster than he believed possible. Ashcroft Dynamics publicly announced sweeping new workplace initiatives led directly by Nathan and endorsed personally by Victoria Whitmore. The business press reacted immediately. Some articles praised the progressive direction. Others mocked it mercilessly. One columnist wrote, Ashcroft Dynamics risks confusing emotional well-being with actual productivity. Victoria framed that article in the executive conference room. Nathan laughed the first time he saw it. You're enjoying this far too much, he told her. Victoria smirked slightly. People fear change most when it threatens unhealthy traditions. Together they worked long hours reshaping policies that had remained untouched for decades. Flexible scheduling. Remote access systems. Parental emergency leave. Mental health support. Reduced unnecessary travel. Mandatory protected family evenings twice weekly for executive staff. Resistance came exactly as Victoria predicted. One senior director openly complained during a board meeting. We are running a corporation, not a nursery. Nathan expected Victoria to respond sharply. Instead she asked calmly, How many times did your daughter ask why you missed dinner growing up? The room went silent instantly. The director stared at her speechless. Victoria continued quietly, because mine asked 37. No one argued further. Nathan learned quickly that beneath Victoria's polished executive exterior lived years of private regret. And perhaps that regret fueled her determination now. One evening after a late strategy session, Nathan found her alone in the conference room staring at an old photograph. She looked up with faint embarrassment. My son, she explained. The picture showed a teenage boy holding a football trophy. He looks happy, Nathan said. He was. Victoria smiled sadly. Before I convinced myself success mattered more than presence. Nathan sat beside her. Do you still speak? Yes. Thankfully. She traced the photo gently. But adulthood arrives before you realize childhood already left. Nathan thought immediately of Emily losing baby teeth, learning to ride bicycles, growing taller each month without permission. Time moved cruelly fast. Victoria glanced toward him. "How is your daughter handling everything?" Nathan smiled unconsciously. "She likes having dinner conversations that don't involve me checking emails." A revolutionary concept. "She also informed her teacher that I now work with feelings." Victoria burst into genuine laughter so suddenly Nathan nearly joined automatically. "That may be the most accurate executive description I've heard in years." Their friendship grew slowly after that. Not dramatic. Not inappropriate. Simply two people carrying different versions of similar regrets. Nathan often stayed after meetings helping Victoria navigate the more human aspects of the policies they introduced. Victoria, in turn, quietly mentored him through corporate politics he previously avoided. For the first time in years, work no longer felt like something stealing his life. It felt connected to it. Months passed. Changes spread gradually through the company. Unexpectedly, productivity improved. Employee retention increased. Absenteeism dropped. People smiled more in hallways. Parents stopped hiding photographs of their children during meetings as though family life weakened professionalism. One afternoon Nathan received an email from a junior accountant named Oliver Briggs. "Thank you. My son stopped asking whether I still live at our house because I'm finally home for bedtime." Nathan read the message twice. Then saved it permanently. That evening he arrived home carrying takeaway chips and lemonade to celebrate Emily's school art award. She launched herself into his arms before he fully opened the door. "You're early." "I know. Terrifying, isn't it?" Mrs. Carter chuckled warmly from the kitchen. Emily grabbed his hand immediately. "Come see my painting." Nathan allowed himself to be dragged into the lounge where a colorful landscape sat proudly on the table. He studied it carefully. Rolling hills. Blue skies. A little cottage beneath bright sunlight. And beside the cottage stood three figures holding hands. Nathan looked quietly at Emily. "You included Mum." Emily nodded softly. "She still belongs in our pictures." His throat tightened unexpectedly. "She absolutely does." Mrs. Carter discreetly busied herself elsewhere while Nathan sat beside his daughter. Emily leaned against him. "Dad?" "Yes?" "You smile more now." The observation caught him off guard. "Do I?" "Emicham," she rested her head against his arm. "Before, your eyes always looked somewhere else." Nathan stared at the painting. Maybe they had. Children noticed absence long before adults admitted it. That night after Emily slept, Nathan stood alone by the window watching city lights shimmer beyond the rooftops. His life still wasn't perfect. Bills remained stressful sometimes. Parenting alone remained exhausting. Grief still arrived unexpectedly in quiet moments. But he no longer felt like he was constantly losing. A message notification appeared on his phone. "Victoria. Board approved Phase 2. Looks like you were right." Nathan smiled slightly before replying. "No. Emily was." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Smart child. The smartest." Nathan set down the phone and looked toward Emily's bedroom. Years earlier, after Claire's funeral, he genuinely believed life would never feel hopeful again. He thought survival itself was the best he could offer. But healing rarely arrived dramatically. Sometimes it appeared quietly through ordinary evenings, honest conversations, and the courage to stop chasing things that looked successful while leaving hearts empty. Several weeks later, Ashcroft Dynamics hosted its first family open day. Executives brought children into offices previously considered too important for ordinary life. Coloring stations replaced one conference room. Another became a quiet reading area. Emily spent most of the afternoon teaching bewildered financial analysts how to build paper birds. Nathan watched from nearby while Victoria approached holding 2 cups of tea. "She's running the place efficiently," Victoria observed. Nathan accepted the tea gratefully. She inherited leadership skills from absolutely nowhere. Victoria smiled softly. Then her expression shifted as she surveyed the bustling floor filled with families, laughter, and conversations once unimaginable inside the company. "I spent 30 years believing professionalism required emotional distance," she admitted quietly. Nathan followed her gaze. Employees introduced children proudly instead of apologetically. Partners chatted comfortably with colleagues. People looked lighter somehow. "Turns out," Victoria continued, "people work better when they remember why their lives matter outside these walls." Nathan nodded slowly. Emily suddenly ran over carrying a paper bird with uneven wings. "This one's for you," she announced proudly to Victoria. Victoria accepted it with surprising delicacy. "It's beautiful." "It's slightly broken," Emily admitted. "But it still flies if you throw it kindly." Victoria looked at the little paper bird for several seconds. Then she smiled with unmistakable emotion. "I think that may describe most people rather well." Later that afternoon, Nathan found himself standing near the windows where months earlier Victoria first offered him the impossible deal. Only now the floor behind him buzzed with warmth instead of tension. Victoria joined him quietly. "You know," she said, "the board expected this initiative to fail spectacularly." Nathan laughed softly. "They still might." "No," she shook her head gently. "Look behind you." Nathan turned. Oliver Briggs knelt helping his son build a cardboard rocket ship. A senior legal advisor who once opposed flexible scheduling sat laughing with twins climbing across her lap. 2 executives discussed holiday plans instead of market projections. Life existed here now. Real life. Nathan looked back toward Victoria. "You changed this." She smiled faintly. "We changed it." He considered correcting her. Instead he simply nodded. Because perhaps she was right. As the event ended, employees gradually departed with tired children and leftover cupcakes. Emily sat on the floor near Nathan's office drawing another picture while he finished organizing paperwork. Victoria paused in the doorway before leaving. "Nathan?" "Yes?" She hesitated slightly. Then, very softly, she said, "Thank you for walking away that day." Nathan looked surprised. Victoria smiled gently. Sometimes it takes one person refusing the wrong life to remind everyone else they deserve better too. After she left, Nathan sat quietly beside Emily. "What are you drawing now?" he asked. She held up the page proudly. It showed a giant office building beneath a bright sun. But unlike her earlier drawings, this one contained dozens of smiling figures near the entrance. Families. Children. Parents holding hands. Above the building she had written carefully in large uneven letters. "Work should not take people away from love." Nathan stared at the sentence while emotion rose unexpectedly in his chest. Emily tilted her head. "Is it good?" Nathan pulled her gently into his arms. "It's perfect." Outside, evening sunlight spilled across the city in warm golden colors. People hurried home through busy streets carrying briefcases, shopping bags, tired expressions, hopeful plans. And somewhere among them were mothers and fathers arriving earlier than before. Children hearing bedtime stories that might once have been missed. Families eating dinner together because a few people finally dared question a life that demanded too much and returned too little. Nathan understood something clearly then. Success was never really about titles. Not promotions. Not corner offices. Not applause from strangers who disappeared the moment usefulness ended. Real success was smaller and quieter. It lived in school concerts attended. In bedtime conversations remembered. In ordinary Tuesdays shared with people who mattered. It lived in being present. Fully, honestly present. Nathan glanced down at Emily resting sleepily against his shoulder. For years he feared walking away from work would destroy their future. Instead, it had finally given them one. And perhaps that was the most shocking deal of all.